Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me is Mike Tagliere. Find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, DFS Day. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I found a fun stat this morning, and I wanted to share it because it's not often I get to share stats just randomly. I always have to find a way to tie them in, but I'm just going to tell this one. So, Dan, there's only been, I think it's 16 quarterbacks in NFL history have thrown 40-plus touchdowns in a season. Aaron Rodgers is the only one to do that on 3 separate occasions. And on top of that, there's only been 3 instances where a quarterback has thrown 40-plus touchdowns and fewer than 8 interceptions. Aaron Rodgers has all 3 of them.
Oh, boy.
Ridiculous,
Aaron Rodgers,
right?
I think he's good, Tags.
He might be the greatest of all time, though nobody wants to admit that.
That was the big debate. I remember that you used to sort of talk about whenever we would bring up Brady, and it would always be like, well, Aaron Rodgers and stuff like that. This season has been great, and we're going to talk, we'll talk about this in another setting, but of the fact that, again, we were talking about prop bets in a different setting. I've probably mentioned the contest before, and the one prop bet, Tags, that you pushed that you really liked was Aaron Rodgers at 25-1 to win MVP. Now, he hasn't gotten the award yet, but we're assuming that he's going to. He looks like a pretty big lock. Kudos to you, man, because it looked to me like Rodgers was kind of on the big downswing, and he had one of the best seasons of his career. So kudos to you, man.
Thanks,
have
buddy.
this nailed. Yeah,
way
to go. And today, though, we're going to be talking about DFS. So we've got a great guest, one of my favorites. Sorry to everybody else. I love everybody, but, this guy, he's top 8 at the very least. It's Derek Brown, senior fantasy football analyst over at Fade the Noise. Find him on Twitter at Debro_FFB. Derek, thanks for coming on.
What's going on, guys? I'm just glad to be inside the top 10, at least hovering around startable material. So, I'm happy to be back. We have a really interesting 4-game slate to break down this week.
Yeah, it's weird. Do you guys like this? Do you have something with 4 games? Is that something that you guys like more? You guys like less? Derek, start with you. Is it harder for you? Is it easier for you? What do you think of these slates?
I love it. I attack all these 4-game, 3-game, 6-game slates. We all talk about in DFS how much we love Thanksgiving. Then why don't we love these playoff slates? It's the same thing. So I love attacking these and trying to get contrarian with them.
Tags, what do you think? Because it strikes me, Tags, as you would not like these as much as you would like a full slate.
I hate showdown slates because I'm terrible at them. But this is bigger. So this is probably the last week of DFS that I'm probably going to play. I don't want to say heavily, but decent. I'll play a decent amount, whereas next week I really won't play much at all. I'm typically a cash game player, and that's why I don't do good in those smaller slates because I'm not contrarian enough. I'm too it's almost too level-headed to think outside the box in that way, and it's something that I've tried to work on, but I need to stay in my lane and just play cash games. So maybe listen to me with my cash game takes, maybe listen to Derek, and maybe Dan, I guess.
No, if you want to turn the way. Eighth best guest we've ever had, so he gets to really lead the way. All right, so we're gonna stick with our usual kind of way that we do the show. Obviously, it'll be a little different because of the smaller slate, but we'll start with our favorite pricier cash game play at each position, discuss a couple of cash game value plays at each position, 1 GPP gamble at each position, quick discussion of the defense, and then stack of the week and lock the week. But before we get into it, we've got 2 giveaways to discuss. First is our perfect draft giveaway, which continues to run through the end of the month. You can draft the perfect 2020 fantasy team using our addictive perfect draft. Find it at fantasypros.com/perfect draft. You guys know what you need to do. You draft a team now. With all the knowledge that we've gained from this season, you try to get the best possible best ball score that you can. And if you beat Tags and Yates' score, we did a podcast the other week where they got scores. If you beat both of their scores, you can be entered to win a signed Alvin Kamara jersey. Just tweet your final score at FantasyPros with the hashtag perfect draft, all one word, and you will be entered. More details on that, over at fantasypros.com/giveaway. And the second giveaway is the usual giveaway that we do each and every month. Finally, I can announce the winner of last month's giveaway because we did pick it. We did confirm it. The James Robinson helmet. It is Michael Piatilla, I believe. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. From Pontiac, Michigan. Congratulations, Michael. Thanks for leaving a review and entering. If you're not Michael, well, come on. Win a signed Deontay Johnson jersey. Same deal. Leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. And then go to fantasypros.com/contest to enter. Again, that runs through the end of January. All right, let's get into it. Favorite pricier cash game play of the weekend. Let's start at running back, and let's start with you, Derek. Go ahead.
So I think the two guys that are jumping out to me the most are Alvin Kamara and Nick Chubb. And I understand the matchup concerns with Alvin Kamara, but this is still a guy that has scored 15.9 DK points or higher in every single game except for Taysom's first start and that total debacle game where they really didn't even have to play the game versus Denver and they had everybody out. I understand that Tampa is extremely tough on the ground and versus receiving backs, but look, Kamara's gotten it done. We've already seen this show play out. 2 games versus Tampa, 23 points and 15 points. We know the volume's going to be there. 17 touches per game over his last 8 games. So Kamara is the definite pay-up option. And on Nick Chubb, I understand the script concerns, but this is still a guy, since he's been back with the Browns since week 10, he scored a touchdown in every single game except for one. We've seen what the floor is. That's 14 DK points. So you know what the floor is that you're going to get for cash games. And going against a Kansas City team that's allowed the 8th most rushing yards, and a Browns team that, even if they're up, they're down, it's neutral, it doesn't matter. They're top 5 in rushing rates, even in negative game scripts. So I think if I'm starting cash game builds on a 4-gamer, that's where I'm starting my builds with. It's going to be Kamara and Nick Chubb.
Yeah, Tags, what do you think? Kamara is 7,900, Chubb 6,600.
I don't think I can get there with Kamara. I don't think he's a bad play. I just don't think I can get there because he's so damn expensive. 7,900, where the next most expensive running back is 68. Now, 6,800, Aaron Jones, I feel like he's the better option here because he's a discounted Kamara, right? It would help Alvin Kamara if Latavius Murray is ruled out for this game, which it seems like it might be trending that way. And I don't blame people to play Kamara. I really don't. I think he's a solid play. However, I think Aaron Jones is a similar play in a similar spot where his touches have come up towards the end of the season. This is what they did last year, where they started ramping up his touches, and they really don't care. They're going to give him 18 plus touches in a game. You look at this Rams defense, they are good. They're very good. That not only against the pass, but they're good against the run. The Rams defense, but the loophole in all of this is that the Rams defense in 8 games at home, they allowed just 108 points to their opponents. On the road, they've allowed 185 points. So they've been a much lesser defense on the road. We did watch Aaron Donald get banged up last week. I think that there's something there. I think that he's going to be trying to play through an injury. This game is taking place in the coldest weather. This game, I looked up the forecast for Green Bay on Sunday night, because this game is the night game on Sunday. 19 degrees is what is expected there in Green Bay. So it's not ideal passing conditions.
It's not the night game. It's not the night game on Sunday.
5:20, right?
No, well, first of all, I'm on East Coast time, but it's Saturday. The Green Bay Rams game, that's 4:35 Saturday on Saturday.
Why?
First game.
I don't know. Maybe where I was looking was wrong, but I swore this was the evening game. But okay, so I need to relook that temperature.
It's gonna be cold regardless. I don't know what the exact temperature is gonna be, but it is gonna be cold, and it is gonna be into the night. Every game is basically into the night anyway at this point.
All right. Well, so I'm sad now because it was better, because I now it's down to 16 degrees on Sunday, but it's Saturday, so it's gonna be around 30 degrees for that game. Not ideal. That's not as good for me. It's because you're closer to freezing point. But either way, I still do believe that this is a matchup where if you were going to look at the production for Green Bay, they're going to score points. People are expecting them to win. They're favorites in this game. You have to figure out where those points are going to come from. And if we're going to dial back Devontae Adams' production just a bit, especially in the red zone against a Jalen Ramsey type cornerback, you have to find where it's going to come. And Aaron Jones he's basically, I call him Alvin Kamara's doppelganger, because I think these two players are so similar in their styles. I think Aaron Jones is so underrated, and the reason he's a little bit underrated is because he plays with Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is he's been dominant, whereas Drew Brees is more of a check down passer as of late, and it's accenting what Alvin Kamara does really well. But Aaron Jones, fantastic in his own right, and you're getting a slight discount going to him. I don't know if you have to play either of these running backs, because I think you're probably going to be paying. It's just really tough to build a lineup this week if you're going to pay up for 2 of the running backs. I do like Chubb though too as well. I think Chubb is a solid value at 6,600.
Yeah, Chubb is the guy that I'm kind of eyeing. It's a little hard because he's $400 more expensive on FanDuel than Jones. But again, on FanDuel tags, we talk about it all the time. You can easily build a FanDuel lineup despite paying up for multiple positions. It's just a lot easier to do it. For me, yeah, I think it is Chubb, because I think, Derek kind of brought up the right points there, and I think that the Browns are going to try to control the game as much as they can on the ground, which is what they want to do anyway. That is how you attack KC. And even last week, you don't want to read too much into it, but Chubb ran more pass routes than Hunt did anyway. So I think Chubb being on the field. It strikes me as there's going to be a ton of volume there for him as they look to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. So I'm kind of eyeing Chubb even at a little bit higher price than Jones on FanDuel, just because, I agree with you on Aaron Donald. He says he's fine. I highly doubt he is. I mean, that looked bad. He tried to come back in the game, right? I mean, and he really couldn't. So maybe he is, but especially in the cold, I agree with you. But I still lean towards Chubb there for it. I'll take the discount over Kamara at 9,000. Let's get to wide receiver. Derek, start us off. Who is your favorite pricier cash game play?
For me, it starts with Tyreek Hill, and I think a lot of people are going to look at Devontae Adams despite the tough matchup. And for me, I love Tyreek Hill, and for a guy that's been known in his career as more of a boom bust option, we've seen more floor than ceiling out of Hill this year. I mean, the guy has scored a touchdown in 12 of his 15 games, and prior to Week 16, where he only played 64% of the snaps, he had 14.8 DK points or more in every single game except for one, and that was when they faced Buffalo, and we all know what happened in that game. Kansas City was just like, all right, we're just going to run the ball, because you're going to let us, so we're not going to stop doing that. So I think as far as like wide receiver pay-up options, Tyreek Hill is the first name that I'm clicking on for all of those reasons, and we know Kansas City is not going to stop throwing the ball. I mean, they got the 4th highest neutral script passing rate. Even if they get up, that's not going away. If I'm looking at a second guy, it's going to be Stefan Diggs. And it's really, when we're going for cash games and we're looking for plays there, it's about volume and it's about your floor. And Stefan Diggs, I mean, this is a guy that, he's got the 3rd highest target share behind only Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins on the season. He's really an 8K wide receiver we're getting at 7,300. He's only been up at 8K once, and he went out and scored 27 DraftKings points last week, and they dropped his price by 400? Like, I don't understand that. But Diggs, you know what you're getting, and that's volume. He's averaging 10 targets a game. I don't see how you get away from Diggs in cash games.
Yeah, Tags, it's a weird week a little bit just because there are so many bad matchups, right? It's like the general matchups that you're going with. Not that surprising. You've got just a few teams left essentially at this point, so it's not surprising that they have strong pass defenses, generally speaking. But there aren't great matchups even at the top. Hill is kind of the best, at least, for me, when I look at it. Denzel Ward should be back, and he does have the speed kind of to the whenever he matches up with Hill, but still, there's no real, stopping Tyreek Hill in that ad. So who's your favorite guy there, Tex?
Yeah, even Denzel Ward with him back in the lineup, he doesn't shadow or anything. They play sides. So Andy Reid's been doing a great job basically picking his battles with Tyreek Hill and where he wants to put him. He's lined up in the slot just over half the time this year, which is obviously where Denzel Ward doesn't go. So looking at the matchup, the Browns have allowed 16 different wide receivers to finish with 15 plus PPR points this year. And that's not even factoring in the Steelers receivers, they all scored 20 plus PPR points last week. And that includes 3 games where they played in like 40-mile-an-hour winds and one with rain in it. So this team has really struggled. And if you look at the competition that they've played, schedule adjusted, this makes them it's the 6th best matchup for a wide receiver based on who they've played and what those receivers averaged in other games versus what they've averaged against the Browns. So I don't know how you get away from Tyreek Hill in this game. He's a slate breaker. He's the guy that if you don't have in your lineup and he goes off, you're screwed because there's not a lot of obvious plays at wide receiver this week. Devontae Adams, he could have a good game against Jalen Ramsey. I think he's just as talented, if not more so, but it will be suppressed. Stefon Diggs, same thing. Could have a good game, but he's still matched up with a Marcus Peters, a Marlon Humphrey. I don't think Jimmy Smith's coming back. But those guys are phenomenal cornerbacks where it's like if we expect them to be limited just a little bit to take the edge off, Cleveland doesn't have that cornerback. And Patrick Mahomes, these guys are well rested. Tyreek Hill was kind of playing through some injuries towards the end of the year, but he's seen at least 10 targets in 6 of the last 9 games. 2 weeks of rest. I mean, Tyreek Hill is a guy that I don't know how we fade him, honestly.
Yeah, on FanDuel, it's not close for me because they're all roughly Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stefan Diggs. It's a $400 price difference between the 3 of them. So for me, Hill is the guy who I'm going with there. On DraftKings, I mean, Diggs does come at a bit of a discount. As Derek said, he's 7,300 versus Hill at 8,000. But for you, Tags, that's not close to really being enough for you to go with Diggs over Hill in cash games, right?
No, I can't do it in cash. I mean, it's nice getting the discount, but there's really a lack of ceiling against Baltimore. So that's really what it comes from. So if Diggs has a solid game, let's say he scores 20 DK points, it's a solid game. That's not going to absolutely bury you. Tyreek Hill could have a 30-point game against Cleveland. Like, that's something that I actually believe is the case, and I think the floor is better with Tyreek Hill than it is with Diggs, because if you look at Baltimore this year, I just pulled it up, they have not allowed a wide receiver more than 22 PPR points all season. So it's not a game you play for. And again, Diggs he's phenomenal. This is taking nothing away from Stefon Diggs, nothing away from Devontae Adams. It's just, this is where you have to choose in that tier, and it's almost like you should give the edge to Tyreek Hill because of the matchup that he has.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah,
you're with it, Derek?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, if you're picking one of the guys to pay up for, I think it's definitely Tyreek Hill. They don't have a corner that can stay with him. And the Browns, we haven't even mentioned here, they're 29th against deep passing, going against Hill, who has the second most deep targets in the NFL this year. He can destroy them. It's not even close if you're picking in between the two.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. Really, the question was just with the discount, essentially, on DraftKings. Again, that's why on FanDuel, it's not thinking twice. On DraftKings, with the $700 discount, they've at least differentiated the price a little bit more, where I think you can think about Diggs, but I think we're all in agreement here. Hill is really the one guy. Again, because as we're talking about, as I mentioned, there aren't a lot of great matchups out there for a lot of these guys here, and Hill is not only the most explosive and for all the reasons, but he does really wind up with the best matchup. So I think we're all in agreement here. Hill is the guy, especially if you're paying up for one wide receiver. Let's go to quarterback here. Derek, who's your favorite pricier cash game play?
I mean, I know people are going to expect me to say Patrick Mahomes here, but for me, it's Lamar Jackson. I mean, I think that his floor we all know the rushing equity. I don't need to give you Lamar Jackson rushing stats. We know the man runs the ball and he runs it well. But the fact of it is that he's on a heater. Over his last 6 games, the lowest this man has scored is 22 DK. We know that he can get it done. If we're talking about, regardless of script, if Baltimore is up, that's probably because Lamar got there with his legs. If they are down, then he's going to throw and add more ceiling to the floor he's already providing you with his legs. So I love Lamar, and I'm actually kind of surprised that they don't have him priced up. I mean, can we say that there's a legitimate argument to make that you could price Lamar up over Patrick Mahomes, considering floor and ceiling in this option? So I like Lamar as far as in cash.
What do you think, Tex?
I don't have an issue with Lamar. I was going back and forth on all these, but it really comes back to Cleveland being more of a funnel defense for me. And if they jump out to a lead, it could be a bad thing. And I don't know if that's going to happen against Buffalo. The line has moved in Buffalo's favor. It went from, I think it opened at 1 or 1.5, and now it's up to 2.5. So people are betting Buffalo, which is obviously, and I actually tried to look at the splits in terms of what Lamar Jackson has done. There's only been 3 games over the last 2 years where Lamar Jackson's been an underdog, and he was actually terrible in those games. But it's way too small of a sample size for me to take it into account. So I really didn't want to do that. But the way he's playing right now, he's playing like the quarterback that he was in 2019, where the people were everybody was talking about. Fantasy players as a whole were like, if this guy performs like this, he's worthy of a borderline first-round pick in fantasy drafts. We knew it wasn't going to keep up, but he's kind of back on that. And Buffalo does struggle against the run. If there's something that they do struggle with, it's against the run. They have struggled with the tight end position, so it does match up with Lamar's strengths. So if I were to choose between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, I'd probably lean Lamar Jackson, but I don't know how I get away from Patrick Mahomes with a team that has a 32.3 team implied total. It's just stupid. The Browns, there have been 7 quarterbacks who have totaled 27 or more DK points against the Browns this year. It's kind of ridiculous. We saw just Ben Roethlisberger kind of go off against them, but Patrick Mahomes is basically involved in every single Chiefs touchdown. That's basically what it comes down to. So when you have a 32.3 point team implied total, I mean, I can't fade Mahomes here. I understand Jackson, and if you need to save $400, you need to save $400 towards your salary. But if I have the funds available and I can only pick one, it'd be Mahomes.
If they were the same price, Derek, because it does sound like you might almost have projected Jackson as your highest scoring quarterback on the week, regardless of price. At the same price, are you still taking Jackson over Mahomes?
I am, only in the sense that his floor and ceiling combination is just ridiculous, and I think that look, Mahomes definitely has a ceiling in this game. I'm not going to debate that is absolutely true. But even if Mahomes, Jackson's rushing just gives him such an immensely high floor as well as a ceiling. like, as much as Tags talked about the Bills' struggle on the ground, that should make us love Jackson even more, especially considering what he could do on top of that. Like, Jackson could run for 100 yards in this game, and what you get based off of his passing is obviously a boon, and this actually sets up as a pretty good game for how Baltimore can attack the Bills' secondary through the air. They're vulnerable versus tight ends. They're vulnerable in the slot. We know that, like, Baltimore has the weapons to accomplish both of those things, even if they get down. So I think considering with it's all the Konami code. It's all the rushing. I think that gives my median projection for points a little bit swayed to Jackson.
Yeah,
interesting.
For what it's worth, I just looked it up while you were talking, Derek, and the Bills have allowed the third most fantasy points on the ground to quarterbacks this year, and they didn't play Lamar.
Yeah.
Yep.
The one thing that I kind of, again, I don't really, on FanDuel, it's a $1,200 difference. So it's much bigger, obviously, different scoring, whatever. But, that's only 400 on DraftKings. The one thing about Mahomes is, and it's a small sample size, so we can disregard it and say whatever, is that he does kind of have a history of running a bit more.
In playoffs,
In the playoffs, right? Right?
Yep.
I mean, I was looking back last year, and I remember it, he had 53 yards in each of the divisional round and then the championship. He wound up with only 29 in the Super Bowl, but if you guys remember, that was like the greatest prop, either the worst beat or the best beat that you could have, because, like, I don't know, the prop was like over under 30 or something rushing yards, and he had like 50 by the second quarter, and then he took like 17 yards or whatever of like sacks or something to try, like, running around to try to run out the clock as best he can, and it wound up losing. So he does run a little bit more in the playoffs, and whether that's by design, whether he saves it up and he doesn't push it as much, he averaged about 16 yards per game during the regular season last year, upped it in the playoffs, same thing the year before. So again, it is something where I think he adds a little bit of extra value there, but I don't have a problem with Lamar Jackson. What do you guys, I want to ask about Josh Allen? I mean, do you think, because he's, kind of like, not Lamar Jackson light, but I know Baltimore's a stout defense, but he always adds on the ground. They're going to find a way to score through the air because of the design of the offense, everything like that. Are you guys at all considering Josh Allen? I'll go to you first, Derek.
In cash, I'm not, only because I like him, and I understand all the concerns and all the reasons to play Josh Allen. I just think that considering where he's priced, I mean, it's $200 more to get up to Lamar Jackson, and that's the biggest reason why I think if we're looking at floor-ceiling combinations, like, Josh Allen's, considering if the Ravens come out here and we see a more healthy secondary and we see them really put it to Josh Allen, and the other thing about this is the Bills come out and play a little bit scared. Like at the beginning of that game last week, they were trying to run the ball. They were getting away from some of the things that got them to this point in the season. If that repeats itself, then I've got some more concerns on Josh Allen than I do with Lamar. And for a $200 price difference, I got to lean Lamar.
Yeah, that's fair. Tags, what about you? Anything at all with Josh Allen?
I'm scared to fade him, to be honest with you. He's playing extremely well as of late, and Baltimore does play a lot of man coverage, and that's something that Josh Allen's done really well against in the entire year. I don't want to fade Josh Allen, honestly. It scares me to do it, but that's why I'm going to Mahomes, because if I had to choose between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, I'd be really torn. The reason that I'm a little bit more torn than Derek is because this goes back to the conversation we had last week, where it was basically it came down to Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Which one did you want to play? And I ultimately went with Josh Allen because I said he doesn't have a ground game that could steal production from him. Zach Moss is out for the year. Devin Singletary does not get goal line carries like ever. Over the last 2 years, I think he's had maybe 5 carries total inside the 5-yard line. So if they're producing, it's going through Josh Allen. And that's the part where Lamar Jackson has J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who have ran extremely well, like 2 of the better, most efficient running backs in football this year, running the ball well. So it's like if they start stealing touchdowns and they sit on the ball a little bit, that can affect Lamar Jackson. Whereas Josh Allen, I think if they get inside the 5 and anybody's rushing it in, it's probably Josh Allen. So I am scared to fade him, but that instead of trying to choose between those guys, that's why I'm just going to go to Mahomes.
All right, let's get to tight ends here. And it's basically, are you going to pay basically $3,000 more for Travis Kelce in this game, or are you probably going down to Mark Andrews at $5,000 versus Kelce at $7,800? I assume that that's a dilemma, Derek, but correct me if I'm wrong, when you're looking at a pricier cash game play.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, that's really where it comes down to. I mean, I think the whole thing about Kelce is we're looking at a wide receiver. This is basically elite volume at the tight end position. I mean, Kelce, can we bring this up? He averaged 7 receptions and 94 receiving yards per game. Like, over his final 8 games, he scored 22.8 or higher DK points in every single game. And his one dud was 16.2, which, can we say that's pretty much close to what Mark Andrews' ceiling is?
Right.
I mean, Kelce is just ridiculous. And I mean, I view Kelce as you're getting another wide receiver. You're getting another wide receiver one in your lineup. You're paying for that production. You're paying for that ceiling floor combination. And that's really where it comes down to. Like, you're hoping Mark Andrews, and I understand the big price discrepancy, but you're hoping that Kelce doesn't break the slate, and you're hoping that Mark Andrews hits close to that 20-point ceiling that we've seen this year.
Yeah. I mean, tags. On DraftKings, it's always a tougher question, right? Because it's just tougher to fit it in.
Yeah.
On FanDuel, I started sort of with the Kelce, Tyreek Hill, kind of Patrick Mahomes, and I was like, I'm just going to build my lineup elsewhere and everything like that. Are you paying up for Travis Kelce if he's your price or cash game option?
I don't know how you don't. We talk about when we have full slates, when we have full 13 game slates or whatever, we talk about, do we play Travis Kelce because he gives you that edge at that position. And and it's something that we always discuss, and it usually works out when you do play him. Now that we're on a 4-game slate, I don't know how you don't. I really don't. It's kind of like a cheat code at a position, and I understand that you're paying up for him, but think of it like a wide receiver. If you were to put Kelce among wide receivers, he was a top 5 wide receiver this year. Again, Derek brought it up, 7 of his last 8 games, 22.8 or more DK points, and then you match him up against this Browns secondary that linebackers and safeties are just terrible. They've dealt with some injuries over the years, sure, but they're just bad. If you factor in their competition, tight ends have scored 21% more PPR points per game against the Browns than they have in their non-Browns games this year. It makes it the second easiest matchup for tight ends based on schedule-adjusted matchup. So you can't not play Travis Kelce.
If Kelce's immensely popular and he goes for 30 and Andrews only gets you 10, you're buried if he's popular.
Yep. Yeah, and he's going to be popular. Like, there's just no way around it on this slate. So, yeah, find a way. Again, FanDuel, much easier to do it. Much easier to fit the high-priced guys in. DraftKings a little tougher, but, yeah, I'm in agreement with you. If you're building your lineup, Kelce's got to be in a cash game. All right, but let's get some value plays now here. Let's go to cash game value plays. Start us off at running back. Derek, go ahead.
So, I mean, obviously, everybody that has followed me on Twitter knows that the first name I'm going to bring up here has got to be Cam Akers. I mean, why is DraftKings still have him at 5,700? I don't get it. The Rams are the second most run-heavy team in the red zone this year. They're tied with Baltimore at 60%. And over his last 5 games that he's played, the dude's averaging almost 25 touches per game. And he's running routes. So regardless of whatever narrative that you craft right now, the Rams, if they want to win this game, are going to have to run the ball. You're not going to rely on the arm or thumb of Jared Goff in this spot. And even if it's the pass game, Akers is going to be involved. He ran a route on 62% of Jared Goff's dropbacks last week. Green Bay has been susceptible to pass-catching backs. Third most receiving yards and third most receiving touchdowns to opposing running backs. So regardless of the script or the narrative that you tell yourself on this game, it's volume, it's ceiling, it's pass catching, it's Cam Akers. The other guy that I want to bring up here is J.K. Dobbins. And I know he's a little bit pricey, and people could be surprised me saying, okay, well, he's a cash game guy. I mean, look, I talked about the red zone role. There is enough red zone rushing on this Baltimore team to go around. I mean, considering the volume that they've had all season long, when they get inside the 20, they're going to run the ball. They're not going to pass the ball. Dobbins has scored a touchdown in each of his last 7 games played. We've all talked about how bad the Bills are on the ground. And Dobbins, we've seen mostly the floor games out of him outside of the one ceiling performance there at the end of the season. But Buffalo is 29th in explosive run rate allowed, and Dobbins has that juice, man. Like, he is first in breakaway run rate. He can break off a long run. Even if he hits the floor like last week, he scores a touchdown. He gets you 13 to 14 points. It's not killing you in your lineups at his price point.
Tags, what do you think about both those guys?
What do I think about both those guys?
Start with Akers.
I like Akers. He's definitely the one that I would play in cash. He's someone that I was looking this up. I mean, he's totaled 55 of 69 touches over the last 2 games with Darrell Henderson out of the lineup. So the concern against the Packers is always, do you get enough volume? Because their opponents have averaged a league low 60.9 plays per game against them this year. The Packers just play this ball control style offense. They have the offense to do it, and it keeps the opposing team off the field. But there were only 3 games this year where their opponents' running backs did not total at least 22 touches. So basically, you're talking about, an 85 to 90% chance that they're going to hit 22 touches. So if you look at that and you say, Cam Akers is getting 80% of touches, he's getting 18 touches in this game. And if you're getting 18 touch running back at 5,700 against a Packers defense that had allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per opportunity this year, behind only the Lions and the Texans, you kind of have to play Cam Akers. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. He's too underpriced not to use him.
Yeah, and as Derek pointed out, Akers has been getting a ton of work in the passing game now and running more routes. And that kind of is what gives him that guaranteed floor, even if they do fall behind, as, they may. And I think they're 6.5 point. I've seen it bounce back and forth between 6.5 and 7 point underdogs in this game. But considering he's so involved in the passing game, he should continue to get plenty of volume tags. What about J.K. Dobbins, the other guy Derek mentioned?
I can't play Dobbins in cash. He's not involved enough in the passing game. So if it goes to a negative game script, if Buffalo jumps up 14-0, all of a sudden you're gonna it totally drags him down. And again, it's really touchdown or bust with him because of his lack of usage in the passing game. I like J.K. Dobbins, the player. I think he's fantastic. But it goes to the conversation next year of how high he's going to go in drafts, and it's like, wait. A guy that's not involved in the passing game this much, you need to almost be guaranteed that he's going to get 18, 20 carries. That does not happen because Gus Edwards is still really good too. So getting a $300 discount, down to Akers makes all the sense in the world. And if you want to go down further, I really think that we should mention Kareem Hunt as a value play this week, because even going through the show and talking through things, and if you want to play Tyreek Hill, if you want to play Travis Kelce, or even subtract one of those guys and play one of the high-end quarterbacks, you need to find value running backs because you can't afford to pay up for them. So Kareem Hunt at 4,800. I've been someone that fades Kareem Hunt like all year long. I've been saying that he's been a bit overrated in fantasy, but at 4,800 on a 4-game slate, it feels like you kind of have to play him in cash. So in the 12 games that both Hunt and Chubb have played, Hunt has run it's 16 more routes than Nick Chubb, and the Browns are 10.5 point underdogs. So the game script should be in Hunt's favor. And then you look at the Chiefs. They allowed 846 receiving yards to running backs this year. No other team in the NFL allowed more than 770 yards. They do limit wide receiver production. So you look at it and it's just like Kareem Hunt, he's probably going to have a good shot to get in the end zone. Even if it's garbage time, I really don't care. Him and Nick Chubb are both used, whether we like it or not, because Nick Chubb is the better running back, in my opinion. But they're both used in this offense. And at 4,800, a guy that's going to get 12 plus touches, I think he's a tremendous value.
Derek, what do you think about Hunt in cash games in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring Hunt up later when we got to GPPs and stuff, but I think he's viable for both. I think that regardless of whatever script you tell yourself and the narrative that you craft for this game, like if the Browns are trailing, if the Browns are up, Hunt is still going to have a role in this. And the other thing about it is, like, we need to look at Hunt as more of he's the wide receiver 2 possibly on this team. He's probably fighting Austin Hooper for that role. And the matchup sets up perfectly like Tags laid out. I mean, Kansas City is 31st in DVOA versus pass-catching backs. I think that Hunt, and we haven't even talked about Narrative Street, and I'm not huge on Narrative Street, but can we talk about, like, that the game played out perfectly for Cleveland last week, that Chubb ran a lot of pass routes, a lot of that could be chalked up to it was either neutral or positive game script. If that goes sideways, do we see more of Hunt? And when I'm talking about Narrative Street, Hunt going back to Kansas City, like, can we all say that, like, Cleveland's probably going to give him some touches inside the 20, and he has a scoring opportunity in this game. So whether we want to play the narrative or not, there are so many different outs for Hunt that I think he's actually viable for GPPs and in cash, depending on how you're building your lineups.
Yep, I like actually the call for both formats. And I agree with you, Tags. He's in. I have a couple of cash game lineups, again, mostly on FanDuel, but he's in them because I do expect, again, you pointed out all year, and I kind of poo-pooed it towards the end of the year when I was making my case. I can't remember which wide receiver it was for, but how tough the Chiefs are against wide receivers. And the Browns want to rely on both of the running backs, whether it's on the ground or even through the air, because they're going to need to find a way to attack this Chiefs defense and put up points. So I do like the Hunt call. Let's go to wide receivers. Who's a cash game value play for you, Derek?
So I'm going to stay in the same game, and we talked about, I know you just brought up how good Kansas City is against wide receivers, but I think Jarvis Landry makes a lot of sense for the volume. I mean, guy's been getting 7.7 targets per game without Odell, weeks 8 through 16. The name of wide receivers that have gotten a higher target share, like he's tied 8th with DeAndre Hopkins. Only Devontae Adams, Stefan Diggs, Myers, Michael Thomas, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Justin Jefferson have had a higher target share over the back half of the season without Odell. If we think that the Browns are going to be trailing, Landry's going to get volume, even if they only throw the ball 30 times. So I like Landry, and the other thing about it is, like, he's going to run approximately 70% of his routes against Travarius Ward and L'Jarius Sneed in the slot, who have shown some cracks in the pavement in their coverage. Like, Ward on the season has allowed 3 touchdowns in his coverage, a 94 pass rating, and Sneed's allowing a 65% catch rate in the slot. So I think that there is a path. We know the volume is going to be there for Landry. I like him at that price point.
Yeah, let me make it as clear as possible. Absolutely. I don't like attacking, taking wide receivers necessarily against the Chiefs. Generally speaking, there are 4 games. There are 4 games this weekend, so I didn't mean to be like, avoid Landry or even Higgins necessarily. Right now,
yes, you
did.
did.
At some point, right, you've got to do it. And Landry was on my list, even for cash games, despite the difficulties that I think, generally speaking, teams have had with their wide receivers against the Chiefs. So, Tag, start with Landry first, thinking about that for a cash game, and then give me one of your cash game value plays.
I love Landry. I think he's a fantastic play. He talked about the target share that he's had, and if you look at the games that Landry has played without Odell Beckham, in games where they didn't have those 40-mile-an-hour winds and heavy rain, he scored at least 11.7 PPR points in every single one of those games. And then if you look at this game and we talk about game script and whatnot, we know Jarvis Landry, can we say for certain that he's going to see more than 6 targets?
Yep, I'd probably put him like median, like 7 to 9 range, or is that a little bit too high?
I think the over/under, would be safe, even if we set it at 7.5. Yep. I think that'd be safe. So if he's getting that, so there have been 15 wide receivers who have seen more than 6 targets against Kansas City, and again, they are very, very good against wide receivers. But 15 wide receivers that have seen at least 7 targets against them. All but one of those wide receivers, which was Jeff Smith, by the way, totaled at least 11.4 DK points. So that's a rock-solid floor for a guy that's costing you $5,600, because basically you're locked into 2x as a floor, and you're probably going to get 3x out of him. That's fantastic for a wide receiver that's $5,600. So, yes, he's a great cash game play. Mine that I'd bring up, and he's not... I don't want to say he's like a crazy, like low-priced value play, but I think he's underpriced, and it's Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas looked so damn good last week against the Bears, and the lack of competence out of the Bears prevented him from kind of truly going off in that game.
Right.
But 5 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. You don't get Michael Thomas at 6,700 when he's Michael Thomas. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Carlton Davis is a guy that people are worried about, and they're like, Carlton Davis. Well, Carlton Davis over the first 8 games of the year allowed basically 50% passing for 271 yards and 2 touchdowns. Okay. Over the second half of the year, he's allowed, I think it's like 65% passing for 604 yards and 3 touchdowns in his coverage. So I do believe he's been trying to play through some injuries. And when you look at the strength of this Tampa Bay team, that you don't run the ball against them. We know that. Alvin Kamara, you could look at his numbers against the Bucs the last 4 times they've played, with Kamara on the team, with Bruce Arians out there with that defense. They're not going to be able to run the ball. It's going to be through the air. And Michael Thomas, healthy at 6,700. Again, him and Landry are basically the core at wide receiver. You kind of have to play those guys in cash just because they're going to get the targets. They are safe plays. If you can get up to Tyreek Hill, for that 3rd wide receiver spot, great. But you're going to sacrifice some other positions. But I think Landry and Thomas are the ultimate cash game plays here.
So, Derek, sounded like you got pretty excited at the mention of Michael Thomas. So go ahead, talk about him.
I love Michael Thomas. I mean, we're going to talk about him more later because I don't know how you get away from him, even in GPPs this week. I mean, like, if the Bears could have done anything on offense and pushed the Saints. We still haven't seen a nuclear outing from Michael Thomas, and it could be this week. I mean, we've seen him finally score a touchdown last week. We've seen him go above 100 receiving yards. We haven't seen him do both in the same game. And in a game where Tags laid it out perfectly. These corners for Tampa Bay have shown themselves as frauds over the back half of the season. Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis can be beat. If we're worried about the Saints being able to run the ball, you want to be gravitating towards how are teams going to have to, not how can they, how are they going to have to attack other teams. If the Saints can't run the ball with a healthier Drew Brees, a healthier set of weapons around him, a fully healthy Michael Thomas, because that's what the Saints did. They sat him down. They said, look, man, like, we could try and get the first seed. That's probably not going to happen. We're going to sit you down. We're going to get you fully healthy. That way you could ball out in the playoffs. I love Michael Thomas this week.
Yeah, Derek Carty was on last week, and remember, Tags, he loved Michael Thomas, and he stumped for him, and really he was right. You know, it didn't exactly work out, but it should have, and it could have if everything kind of just played out normally. So, all right, I love it, guys. Let's go to quarterback. Derek, cash game value play.
I'm going to stay with the Saints here. I think that Drew Brees is still undervalued. I love the fact of his price point, the fact that he's below 6K, and a lot of people are going to say, as soon as they hear the name, he's washed, he's old, he's like, look, that's fine, but you can't tell me this man is not going to score DK points. And at the end of the day, that's what I care about. 12 full games. He has scored 18.5 or higher DK points in 75% of them. In 50% of those games, he's gone above 20 DK. In a game I just talked about, Michael Thomas could go nuclear. Why do we not want the man that's going to be throwing him the freaking ball? He had 23 DK points the last time versus Tampa. I love Drew Brees. I'm going to go to him in cash games. I love him in GPPs. I think that he's a fantastic play this week.
Tags, what do you think about Brees?
Brees is definitely the one that I was going to go with here as well in the value plays. If you want to save some money at the quarterback position, he's the guy I'd go to. This game is being played in a dome, so you don't have to worry about weather at all. Brees, we know over the course of his career, plays a ton better at home. This game has the second highest total on the slate at 52 points. The Bucs defense, number one against the run. They've allowed just 8.8 fantasy points per game on the ground to running back, so any production is likely going to come through the air. And then you look at it, since week 9, there's been just one quarterback who's failed to score at least 17 fantasy points against the Bucs, and that was Chase frickin' Daniel. So, I mean, the last time these two teams met, Drew Brees with by the way, Michael Thomas was not even healthy in that game.
Right.
Brees completed 26 of 32 passes for 222 yards and 4 touchdowns. This is, again, he should come with a solid floor and a high-scoring game. The only concern here is Taysom Hill being a thorn in our sides. But again, at 5,600, that's kind of built into his cost.
Yeah, no, I like it. It was on my list too. Let's go to tight end then. Let's go to a cash game value play. If you're not paying up for Travis Kelce, who's it going to be in cash? Derek.
The first guy that I want to stay in one of these high total games, and I like Austin Hooper at 3,800. I mean, his last 4 games, I know that one of those was basically the entire roster was depleted, but the 3 other games we can't dismiss. I mean, the guy has scored 17, 13, 14, 15 DK points in his last 4 games. Kansas City has notably struggled against 2 things over the last few years. That's short passing, and that's the tight end position. They are 3rd in DVOA against deep passing, but 22nd against short passing. If it's not Kareem Hunt catching passes, I think it's going to be Austin Hooper. I like him a lot. I think he's actually a little bit underpriced, considering the matchup where Kansas City's allowed the 5th most receiving yards and 8th most receptions to the tight end position. So I definitely think that he offers you a floor, as well as, I mean, he could score just as much as Mark Andrews this week, and the price point's not even close.
How about you, Tags? What do you think about Hooper?
Hooper's the one. The Chiefs, they've been good against wide receivers, tight ends. They've allowed 1.96 PPR points per target. That's the 7th most in football. And it's also led to them allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the tight end position on the season. So, again, you have to project game script in these games. And I don't know if anybody sees any situation where the Chiefs are up big or the Browns are up big on the Chiefs. Right. And if they were, obviously Austin Hooper is going to be part of the scoring there. He has scored quite a bit as of late. It seems like right when he came back from his appendectomy, he wasn't maybe 100%. I don't know what was going on, but he wasn't involved so much. But we've seen him come on more and more and more. So in this matchup, I do think Hooper is a guy that, even if you want to go the double tight end route and say, I'm going to play Austin Hooper in the flex because he's 3,800 and he's probably a better play than the wide receivers in that range, I have no issue if you want to do that.
Yeah, I like that call. Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead, Derek. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. I mean, I like the call. I mean, if you're looking at, because sub 4K, we're looking at options in that you're really looking, even at GPPs, man. Like, you're looking for 12 points, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe a little bit above that, and you're probably making the optimal lineup. So I think that, especially we're talking about it on a 4-gamer, getting weird with some of your builds and trying to be a little bit different from the field, even in cash games, is definitely viable, especially at Hooper's price point.
All right, let's move on to GPPs. Derek, you've been patient. I appreciate it. I know you want to talk about it. Let's get into it. Running back, start us off. Who do you like?
I already brought him up. I mean, I'm just going to hammer on Kareem Hunt more. I think that he is a fantastic GPP option. If we're talking about a lot of these different options, and considering where roster percentages come in this week for GPPs, if people are going to gravitate to the other options in this game, especially in game stacks, I like Kareem Hunt, because if he's not going to be popular, people are going to more likely go to Nick Chubb, considering what they saw last week. Or if they're going to go to Jarvis Landry, I think that he's a fantastic option in GPPs, especially if you're game stacking. I think that getting off of, like, say, instead of Nick Chubb, or playing Nick Chubb and Jarvis Landry in a Kansas City-Cleveland game stack, going Kareem Hunt and Austin Hooper, just to try to get leverage on the field on a 4-gamer, I think he's a great option this week.
Tag, we talked about Hunt in cash games. Do you like him as well as in tournaments?
He's fine in tournaments as well. And Devin Singletary is probably someone we should have talked about, even in cash, because I think he deserves consideration for both. I probably like him more in tournaments, just because you're hoping he's involved in the passing game quite a bit. But with Zach Moss out, we saw this last year, right? You know, we saw when Frank Gore kind of like trailed off, and then we saw Devin Singletary getting a role that was netting 18 touches per game. And that's basically the same thing that we're looking at with Cam Akers. Now, it's not as good of a matchup for Singletary as it is for Akers, but you're getting a $1,300 or $1,200 discount. You have a matchup against Baltimore, who they are good. They're a very good defense. They're a better pass defense than they are run defense. You've seen 5 different running backs total 20 or more PPR points against them this year. So for a running back that's probably going to be getting, 16 plus touches in the game, at 4,500, Devin Singletary is probably going to be a little overlooked.
Yeah, he was a guy I was considering bringing up earlier, but since we had, we're kind of going in depth on a couple of guys, I'll ask you now, Derek, with GPPs, what do you think about Singletary?
I like him. I don't love him. And for a lot of the reasons we talked about with Josh Allen, it's just the touchdown equity and can he realize his ceiling? Like, he has the backfield all to himself. Like, I don't think that we have to worry about another running back outside of Josh Allen factoring in there. I really comes down to, do we think that Devin Singletary can, at his price point, he could still score you 12 points and possibly make the optimal for GPPs. I'm not going to dismiss that at all. I think it really comes down to, do we think that he could realize a ceiling or possibly score in this game? And that's the question, him versus some of the other options in the 4K range. And I'm going to bring up another guy here in a second that's from that same team that I like. And I just don't know if I see a ceiling with Devin Singletary.
All right. So do you have another running back you want to talk about? You want to go to wide receiver?
It's actually wide receiver.
Go for it. Let's start with wide receiver. Go ahead.
So, the guy that I think is going to get overlooked, and I think is going to be very integral to how Buffalo can attack Baltimore, is Gabriel Davis. At 4K, I think, like, with Beasley still playing, because he basically played his allotment of snaps. There wasn't a whole lot of difference with him playing 69% of the snaps last week. That was in the range. And we've heard all the reports out of Buffalo. Beasley is gutting it out. He's basically playing on one leg. I think that Gabriel Davis is really how Daboll and this offense is going to look to attack this Baltimore secondary. Pittsburgh did this when they played them previously. They spread them out and they ran 4 wide receivers a lot, trying to get some of these other backup corners for Baltimore on the field. And Gabriel Davis, look, he ran 75% of his routes from the slot last week. He still played over 50% of the snaps. And he was only ran 8 routes less than Cole Beasley. I think Buffalo is going to run enough 4 wide in this game. I mean, on the regular season, they were second in the NFL in it, behind only the Arizona Cardinals. I think that if we see Buffalo come out, throw the ball, that if we get Gabriel Davis in the slot, and yes, Marlon Humphrey can go to the slot, but is he going to match up with Gabriel Davis, or is he going to go against Cole Beasley? You're talking about Davis in the slot versus possibly Tramon Williams, who has had a great career, but I'm sorry, Gabriel Davis can burn that guy at this point in his career. I love him in GPPs because I think it's a really, really good attack point for how the Bills can look to exploit some of the depth and deeper recesses of this depth chart for Baltimore.
Tags, what do you think? I don't think that was a name I was expecting to hear. So what do you think about Gabriel Davis?
It was not someone that I was contemplating. I don't think it's a bad idea. Then this is where it comes to me in tournaments, where it's like you're talking about a part-time player, a guy that's going to come on the field in 4 wide receiver sets with John Brown back. But that's probably what you need to do in these slates, because Gabriel Davis is not going to be heavily owned at all.
Right.
I'm definitely not as contrarian with this one. I'm going to go to Antonio Brown. You look at Mike Evans' career against Marshawn Lattimore, it's been bad, like legitimately bad. And Mike Evans is not 100%. So if you look at Antonio Brown, the way he's played over the last month, it's like the old AB is coming back. Like that's basically what we're starting to see. We're starting to see him get more comfortable in the offense. He's found the end zone 5 times over his last 4 games. He scored at least 13.5 PPR points in each of those games. The Saints defense is not bad by any means, but they're elite against the run. Not only that, but Ronald Jones still not practicing, not cleared. Leonard Fournette is just a guy. So the production is like, if we're looking at that and we say this game has a 52-point total, all right, they're not getting a whole lot on the ground. Okay, Mike Evans is going to be limited by Marshawn Lattimore. Chris Godwin hasn't been particularly great against this defense ever since they realized who he was, because he had one big game against them last year, and then it was like, okay, the Saints realized we have to take care of this guy, and they've done a good job since then. Whereas Antonio Brown, I like him in tournaments. I think that he's someone that people could actually consider in cash if they wanted to at 5,400 because he's priced so low, but there is some risk built in there because there are obviously other options at wide receiver and at tight end. But in tournaments, I like Antonio Brown.
I like that call, Tags. I was actually going to bring up AB earlier in our cash game value spot, and the reason I like AB too, on top of all the reasons that you stated, is his slot usage has bumped up over the last 3 weeks. I mean, you look at his previous 6 games, he was running out of the slot 14% of the time. He's near 30% over the last 3 games, and that's where you attack the Saints secondary.
Yep. All right, let's go to quarterback now. Give me a GPP play at the position, Derek.
I mean, I'm going to still hammer on Drew Brees. I think that people are not going to give him enough love, and I think the floor is definitively there, but I think he can actually realize a ceiling. Like, I think that 300 yards and 3 touchdowns is firmly in play for Drew Brees, and on a 4-gamer where people are going to pay up for Patrick Mahomes, people are going to pay up for Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Those are easily going to be the 3 highest owned quarterbacks on this slate. If people are going to look for a 4th, do they go to Brady? Do they get cute and go to Baker? I think that Brees is going to get overlooked, and I love him in this slate. Like, I think that he really, really has a ceiling here.
What do you think, Tags?
I love Brees too. I mean, that's why I was talking about him in cash games, because in a 4-game slate, you need the floor and you need a ceiling, and Brees has that. But I think Baker is someone that I'd consider too, just from a correlation standpoint, because if people want to play Mahomes and they want to play Tyreek and Kelce, I don't blame them for wanting to play everybody. But if the Chiefs are going off in that aspect and you have those guys in your lineup, you could kind of put Baker in there and attach him with Landry, get the stack there, and then you also could play, and they're cheaper, which allows you to play the guys like Tyreek, like Travis Kelce, and basically just stack the hell out of that game. I mean, if you didn't stack Pittsburgh and Cleveland last week, you didn't make much money. I mean, maybe Buffalo, you could have done that, but if you didn't have a lot of that game, you were in trouble. This is the game I want to attach myself to. So Cleveland, Kansas City, I mean, most of my lineups will consist of players in that game.
Yeah, and again, with Baker, the thing you think about is, whenever you think about his year, remember, he had a few games that were completely derailed by the wind, right?
Yep.
And then you had a game where he had no wide receivers to throw the ball to. You throw those games out, he comes with a pretty high ceiling, generally speaking, and not a terrible floor. So, yeah, he was the guy who I was thinking about as well. I know you'd already talked about Brees, so the other guy was Baker. And especially on FanDuel, given his price, I just don't – he's not cheap enough to the point where I think people are going to flock towards him. Right. So I think in GPPs in particular, that's where you can really gain an edge with Baker. Let's go to tight end here. GPPs, finish it up on the GPP slate. What do you think, Derek?
So last week, everybody was all on Mark Andrews. He was the chalk. I think that people are going to go back and gravitate and possibly go to Marquise Brown after last week's performance. I love Mark Andrews and GPPs. I think that the way that you attack Buffalo is definitely with the tight end position. I talked about all my Lamar love earlier in the episode. Buffalo's allowed the second most receiving yards and most receptions to the tight end position, and that's even with Matt Milano. And Tre'Davious White's actually covered tight ends in some aspects. He covered Jack Doyle last week. 4 targets, 3 receptions allowed. So even if they put Trey on him, I think that Mark Andrews could definitely actualize the ceiling. If people got burned off of him last week, I didn't have a whole lot of Mark Andrews last week because he was going to be chalk. If people are not going to play him, that's the direction I'm going this week.
What do you think, Dax?
I dig it. That's a fantastic call. I mean, that's the thing is most people are either going to say, hey, if I can't get to Kelce, I'm going to pay up for Tyreek or I'm going to pay up for this guy, and then I'm just going to go cheaper at tight end. They're going to play Austin Hooper. Right. So you're probably going to have Mark Andrews kind of left out there in no-no land. So, yeah, he should be under-owned. I think it's a fantastic play.
By the way, did you say no-no land? Was that?
I don't know what I said, Dan. Sometimes I just say things.
No-no land. Well, we're going to go to no-no land. But I agree, regardless of no-no land or no man's land, the correct way to say that phrase. I agree. Mark Andrews is perfect. And for the exact reasons, both of you who just sort of said it, if you're going to pay up at tight end, you're going to want to go to Kelce. And then if not, you're right. You're going to fit in all the other guys. And you're probably going to get away from Andrews, especially if you did play him last week. So I think that's a fantastic call for GPPs. Let's go to Tags' favorite segment, DST. All right, we've got eight choices here. Derek, what do you got here?
I'm just gonna go. I'm always the punt defense guy. On these 4-game slates, I think like last week, there were certain defensive options that kind of stood out to me. This week, and look, I understand how good Green Bay has been. I get all the reasons to shy away from the Rams. I think that they're going to be my defensive option. I mean, they've scored 11 or more DK points in 5 of the last 7 games. And people are going to shy away from other games. The total's a little bit lower in this one, but even if they're talking about, okay, Green Bay is scoring in this game, people shy away from defenses and say, well, if teams put up points, then you don't want the DST, right? The Rams scored 16 DK points, and they had a total of 50 points in last week's game. Week 13 versus Arizona, 66 total points, 11 DK points. You want teams that are going to throw the ball. I think that the Rams are a top 3 run defense in the NFL. So I don't know how much success Aaron Jones has on the ground. If Aaron Rodgers, we've seen him in very small sample sizes melt down. Like when Tampa was able to pressure him, and versus this secondary, I like the Rams here, especially if you're going to play Akers, getting the correlation there. Whether you want to talk about defensive correlations and running backs on a 4-gamer, that's fine. I'm not going to fight anybody on that. But just for the price point, I love the Rams.
Tags, Rams second cheapest defense on the slate. Browns are 2,300, Rams at 2,600. Are you looking at the Rams as well?
Yes. You pick the lowest price defense that doesn't make you want to throw up. And basically, you really hate playing a defense in Green Bay against Aaron Rodgers because he just doesn't turn the ball over there. But again, it comes back to the idea that you just want pressure, right? That's all you're looking for. And I don't think there's many good defensive plays in general here. So it's going to come down to a lot of variation. Like if you can get up to the Chiefs at 3,600, great, do that. That would be my choice because they can get pressure on Baker Mayfield. And it should be a negative game script that should allow for plenty of turnover opportunities because you're going to see the Browns throw the ball more than they typically would. So I do like the Chiefs defense at 36, but I can't get there in cash. I can't even get close. And the Browns at 2,300 make you want to throw up. So I can't do that. So I'll do 2,600 for the Rams.
All right. So we've talked a lot about this anyway, but let's just kind of formalize it while we finish up with our stack of the week and our lock of the week. We'll start with the stack. Go ahead, Derek.
I've talked about how much I love them so much through the entire episode. Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews is my top stack of the week. I love them. I think there's multiple ways that you can stack that game. There's multiple run back options and just different ways that you can be with your builds. And we're talking about a lot of times when you're going with the quarterbacks, especially non-running quarterbacks, you want 2 pass catchers. You don't need that with Lamar. You need one guy, and that's it. Call it a day.
Yep. Tags, what about you? Stack of the week.
Solid. I'm just going to do the entire Chiefs team. Just put them all in your lineup. Right. No, in reality, it's going to be too expensive to do that. So I think you want to come back, and I would actually do. I think the Baker, Jarvis Landry, and then come on the flip side and bring back Kelce and Tyreek Hill, and just stack that game right there.
Yeah. All right. Lock of the week. Go ahead, Derek.
It's Michael Thomas. I mean, I've talked about how much I love him. One more little stat. Since 2018, home in the Dome, 23 games. Dude is averaging 102 receiving yards and 23 DK points per game versus 78 and 17 on the road. I love Michael Thomas this week. He's still underpriced. We still haven't seen a ceiling. If he goes for 30, good luck not having him in your lineups.
All right, Tags, lock of the week.
Yeah, Michael Thomas was basically I had it down to 2 guys, so I wanted to basically have whichever one, because it's such a small slate. I figured Derek and I would be close in terms of lock, and Michael Thomas was one of those guys. The other one is Travis Kelce.
Love it.
Kelce's not. You play those guys.
I can't argue with either one. All right, Derek, it was great having you back. Rapidly moving up my favorite guest list to at no worse than 7 now after this one. Remind everybody where they can find more of you and your work.
Yeah, check me out on Twitter at dbro_FFB. All my work for the remainder of the season, even moving into the off season, is going to be over at FTN Daily, FTN Fantasy, FTNBets.com. As well as you can check out my podcast with my co-host Adam Pfeiffer at Chalk Fade on Twitter. We're Fade the Chalk on iTunes. We're going to be diving into prospects here shortly once NFL draft kind of heats up. Do some more dynasty talk. Man, football never stops, guys. We just kind of switch and change our content.
Yeah, Derek really does great work. Everybody should follow him and his content, and we do love having him on the thing. We have a ton of laughs even before we get started, so it's really fun. We'll be back next week talking DFS as always, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.